dear participants and organizers of the conference. The wandering of the humankind starts with expelling from the paradise both the exegetes of the Holy Bible and the specialists of literature identify the notion of paradise with home, which always remains in human memory as the garden of primordial harmony and which is projected to the ideal past. In the same way, in the life of every person, the ideal past, which existed before, expelled from the paradise, and the beginning of wandering can be present. Since that time, the chosen people, and with it, the whole humankind is experiencing several remarkable changes, regaining the status of the wanderer. Noah remains within the power of water. His last shelter is the ark. After the floods of the sin, patriarchs wander around, and their nomadic way of life is indelibly impressed into the identity of the people. Crop failure and famine forces to return to Egypt to Joseph. Exodus means leaving or moving out of Egypt with a goal to reach the promised land. However, again, misunderstanding and mistake in communication threw back the people into nomadic status for 39 years in the desert. The map with the territories of the tribes of Israel creates this impression that finally life has settled. Finally, people are at home. This is the time when the religious tourism was taking place in its basic form, the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the holy place, the temple. The exile of Babylon again breaks the balance of these people who would prefer to stay in their motherland and not to leave. And then the destruction of the temple and the demolition of Jerusalem outlines the beginning of new wandering. Paradoxically, that the chosen people at the moment already are disseminated along the Mediterranean Sea, forming a multiple diaspora. The phenomenon of wandering can be attributed mostly to this particular period. Jerusalem has become inapproachable. New meaning, new vision of the world, new way of life must be found to bear this experience and this existence. Finally, the state of Israel, which allows to conjure the home which so often is questioned. Returning home, the feeling of home, the native language, not only in a ghetto, not only in a Jewish quarter, but in the whole state. Kaunas is reborn, says Levinas. It is not only a dream, but reality. Wanderings could come to an end, and now, but however, they continue. The phases and periods of the spiritual development of the people invites us to consider the phenomenon of wandering and continue this tradition, which reminds us about the inconstancy, insecurity, about the responsibility towards the other wanderers, hospitality towards refugees, persecuted strangers, which reminds about God's care, providence, who has always taken care of the chosen people in all their wanderings. Jewish feast of Sukkot or Chat feast, when Jews are invited to remember the ancient experience in the desert, reminds about the people who do not have home, who are forced to wander. around and who are longing for their own land. However, this land is not in this world. It appears that this promised land is not the land of Canaan, but some much better land to where we have to wander. If no land belongs to us there, if we do not have the rights to any land or territory in the world, then God, the Almighty Creator, can create new heaven and new earth for his chosen people. So the wanderings continue, but we know that they have a goal. One day we shall arrive at the end of the route, which the great guide has outlined for us. Emanuel Levinas thinks about the wandering in the context of Judaism and Old Testament, ontology, phenomenology, ethical eternity, and search for the meaning. His collection of articles, The Difficult Freedom, tells about the wandering Jew, which has become immortal. Levinas shows that the anachronism of Midrash corresponds to eternity. Each hero becomes eternal. Whereas this Jew wanderer, maybe vagabond, becomes observer and assessor. His presence is necessary so that the humanity can better experience the other meaning, the other sense, the other goal of the historical process. However, we do not have the right to judge the history. Hagar and Ishmael are justified as two episodes in the book of Genesis narrates they are wandering. Paradoxically, it is not possible to judge Ishmael. It is also necessary to stop the conflict and hatred between blood relatives. Levinas points out that for the God, it is important, but human being is today, at this instant, but not what he will be tomorrow. But today, Hagar and Ishmael are expelled. They are exiles, wanderers without their motherland. Therefore, God does not judge them, but guards and takes care of them. Who will offer the source in the desert for today's Ishmael? The experience of captivity and gradual comprehension of the tragedy that is happening around does not allow to agree with the shelter of the place. It is not possible that the place, the land, belongs to somebody. God says, I will give it to you. It does not belong to us in the sense of Roman law. Therefore, Levinas remains eternal traveler and does not accept the call of Martin Heidegger, finally to feel like at home, at yourself. This pilgrimage can't end on this earth because it is eschatological pilgrimage towards the kingdom up to the end of time, the fulfillment of time. The moral and ethical asceticism of Levinas softens the impossibility of coziness by the demand of justice, which inevitably has to be applied towards yourself. Then this buffer allows to give the maximum and to keep the minimum, thus not destroying yourself. Thinking about the status of the pilgrimage, we can turn towards the image of the hostage analyzed by Levinas. We can imagine it as two extremes, careless wanderer and a hostage who is forbidden to change his location and whose life is in great danger. Somehow we all are the hostage for each other. My careless religious tourism is a scandal beside the unhappy person who is calling for help, be it Šiluva, Agluona, or Notre Dame de Paris. Rave and pure aestheticism is meaningless without noticing a person next to me. The warning of Pope Francis to people about the danger of consumerism in encyclical Laudato Si stops us and demands to look around us. Pandemic, which has interrupted our intemperate traveling and the surfeit with impressions, did not automatically break our incorrect attitude towards creation. Pilgrimage is an attitude. The utterance, sacred tourism, shows precisely the discordance with the human perfection. Levinas constantly invites to transfer from the sacred to the holy. Sacred buildings, architecture, art, music will not transfigure us unless we turn ourselves towards the holy and holiness to which we are called by our neighbor, the other person beside us. Therefore, regardless of the place where I am, home, journey, some sacred place, I have to situate myself in front of the holy, which will make me holy. The notion of traces, characteristic to Levinas, reminds us about many testimonies which surrounds us. If we have to go in some particular direction, then it is where we can find God. He has left his word, revelation, to us. These are the traces we could follow. Also, the heritage of religious culture, which is left to us from the previous generations, is the trace which leads towards the experience of our predecessors and opportunity to share this experience with them. The architecture of the churches, to avoid the ambiguous notion sacred architecture, speaks to us in the language of architecture and synthesis of arts, narrating the attempts to formulate the religious experience of the previous generations. Their wanderings, perhaps as very focused pilgrimage, is an opportunity for us today. Joyful insight, vocation, let's go wandering. But where exactly? It is also an exciting adventure to meet others, also people from the past, to ask them, is it good to wander? What we must keep in mind during our wanderings, which places we have to visit and what we can't miss. What in our wanderings will be the same with their experience? Coming back home, the only home, rooms which are prepared for us. This is the goal and final destination of all wanderings. My father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thank you for your attention.